My party political career began in 1985,
Right.
when I joined the Labour Party in Harlow, and for the next 13 years I was a member of Harlow constituency Labour Party. Not particularly active, but I used to campaign obviously at the election time and support the Labour candidates and what have you.
Right. Okay. Now, at some point you got involved with UKIP, UK Independence Party. What year would that be, Tony?
That was the year that Tony Blair was elected on a landslide in May.
Right.
And I was overjoyed, actually. I remember very, very clearly that the day after that we were up with a family.
Yeah, were you singing Things Can Only Get Better?
Yeah, I was really, yeah, I was. It was. We were taking the children up for a short holiday in Scotland, and we were driving up there as the news came through of this crushing Labour victory. And
right.
yeah, I was overjoyed. It was a lovely spring day in May, and Blair got elected, and all these lovely promises and so on. Two things happened really, I think, fairly rapidly. First of all, the kind of shine wore off Labour quite quickly, in my judgment, in that Blair seemed to be fawning over celebrities and so on, and he didn't seem to be going all out to help the poorer off, which is really what my political motivation was. But the other thing that was happening at that time is, partly because by that time I'd become a Christian, I was becoming more interested in wider developments in the world, and I suddenly became deeply interested in the subject of the European Union and read up rapidly on it. Partly because, and I don't know how much time we've got to cover this, but it's an interesting subject in its own right. Partly because I was able to see, with the aid of what I'd read, that the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, was playing a very big part in the whole development of this European Union project. And if there's any doubt about that, some of the main people who founded the European Union in the 1950s and so on have subsequently been canonised by the Pope, made into saints. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's a good illustration of the fact that somewhere behind the scenes, the Roman Catholic Church, the papacy, has been very much behind this whole project.
Right. And you were against that, and that influence?
Well, I'm not quite sure when it was, but there was a very good book published by two authors called Dr. Richard North and Christopher Booker, who writes for the Sunday Telegraph, called The Great Deception. So it's a big work which documented the history of the development of the European Union, from the common market to the European Community, European Union and so on. And one of the key themes of that whole book was deception. The powers that be were deliberately portraying the European Union as just a trade project, single market, emphasising the economic arguments, whereas in fact the deliberate design was to take more and more power away from the nation states and give it to this very undemocratic European Union, which is the way I saw it.
Right.
So suddenly I kind of realised that something I'd missed for a long period of time was that there were these rather shady powers, as it were, arranging for this supranational body, the European Union, to progressively remove powers from the nation state and acquire powers themselves. And we've seen this in the last 20 years develop. I think at the time that I left the Labour Party and joined the UK Independence Party, which was late 1997, I think. At that time there was only 12 nations in the European Union. Now we've got, what, 27 is it at the moment?
Right.
27, 28.
You joined the UK Independence Party. We were speaking about left-wing versus right-wing politics. UKIP, well, as my knowledge is concerned, is considered right of centre, is it not?
Yes, it is considered right of centre.
I think it's a little bit old-fashioned to think in those terms now, because personally, I think there's no difference between left and right. I don't think in those terms anymore of left and right.
I think it's fair to say that a lot of people in the UK Independence Party are you know, to a greater or lesser extent, nationalist in that they believe in the nation state. They believe in the United Kingdom as the place where decisions should be made. And you know, there's an element of looking back into history and feeling that they're English and British, you know, and we don't want foreigners running our affairs, all that kind of thing. But in actual fact, I stood in 2 general elections here in Harlow and stood for local councils. And Harlow is a working class town, basically, London overspill. And I would say the majority of my support came not from you know, right-wing nationalists, of which there aren't many in Harlow, but it came from ordinary working class people who were feeling that the Labour Party no longer represented them. And if you look at UKIP support, it's been proved, I think, it comes just as much from former Labour supporters as Conservative supporters.
Right. But now, can we mention Robert Kilroy-Silk?
Yeah, you're moving on a little bit now, but we're moving on to 1999 first of all, when by that time I'd qualified as a solicitor in 1993, and I practiced as a lawyer for 6 years. And then in 1999 I actively campaigned in the European election as the campaign organiser for Geoffrey Titford, who was the UKIP candidate. And you know, like I try to do with all campaigns, do it to the best of my ability and with great enthusiasm. And I zipped round the eastern region here, handing out leaflets, organising meetings, that kind of thing. And on the back of that, Geoffrey Titford said, I'd like you to be my political secretary. I'd like you to set up a UKIP office for me in Chelmsford and run it. And so I did that for 2 years until 2001. Then went off to do other work, and then in 2005 Kilroy-Silk suddenly became interested in the European question. 2004 it was, I think, that he became elected. Yeah, 2004. And he was looking around again for somebody to act as his secretary, and he appointed me to work for him, and I worked for him for just over a year. Right.
So he became a member of the European Parliament, Robert.
Yeah. Again, I was very active in the 2004 general election. I stood as a candidate in Harlow. And
this is for the UK Parliament.
For the European Parliament.
Right.
And there was a surge of support in 2004 for the UK Independence Party, as there has been in every European election. And Robert Kilroy-Silk was elected to represent the East Midlands region, I think it was.
Right.
Yeah, the East Midlands region. And Kilroy-Silk lived down here in Hertfordshire, and I was recommended to him, and I served him for about a year working as his secretary and researcher.
Right, okay. Robert Kilroy-Silk was a fairly high-profile sort of character.
Yeah.
And he's not involved, as far as I'm aware, in UK politics anymore. Yeah. Can you tell us what happened with Robert Kilroy-Silk?
Well, it was a very, very busy, intense year. He was a demanding employer, but a fair one. You know, paid a good wage and didn't demand too much in terms of time, but great intensity, because he wanted constant briefing on European and other issues, and I was churning out things daily and under great pressure to deliver good briefings on a very regular basis, sometimes 2 or 3 things in a day, you know. Tony, I want the facts on this, I want the facts on that, you know, I need it by 5 o'clock, that kind of thing. But what happened really, looking back, was Kilroy-Silk was ambitious to become the leader of the UK Independence Party, and he tried to form a breakaway political party, which he did, called Veritas, so the Latin for truth.
Yeah.
And I was instrumental in helping him set that party up. I mean, I didn't have a great deal of choices, he was my employer.
Right.
But that involved helping him to set up this new political party, Veritas, and for 3 days I was the leader of the party.
Right.
Because you have to fill in forms, and Kilroy-Silk didn't want to be known that he was setting up this party, so he said, look Tony, you have to act as the leader for a few days before I make my announcement.
Right. What's your opinion, Tony, just to throw this in, on Nigel Farage?
I think I can sum it up quite well. Nigel Farage is a brilliant, quick thinker, and excellent in debate. And when giving interviews, he is sharp, to the point, a little bit edgy, and comes over very well, as you can tell when he's interviewed on Question Time, and so on. He performs very well. He makes very effective short speeches in the European Parliament. He's got an ability to select the right quote, the right message, and has obviously connected with a significant section of the British public. What perhaps he hasn't done is broaden the base of the party beyond just the European question. So I think a lot of people don't quite know what the party is about, and it has over the past come up with some fairly bizarre policies.
Right.
And so nobody really quite knows what they stand for, apart from the fact that they don't like the European Union, and the other secondary message that they're promoting is that there's too much immigration; it needs to be controlled. And for both of those, there's a fair amount of support, obviously, in the British public.
Do you think they're setting up the UKIP as, because my opinion is that all of these parties are manipulated from the outside and from higher up anyway. I don't buy the idea that they're all just fully independent trying to get support from the public. I suspect there are people in higher positions who basically choose which parties are going to do well, because we might come on to talk about Murdoch and people like that. My view is that they've been selected as the next third party, if you like. The Lib Dems used to be.
I think it is very interesting. I know we're going to talk about the media a bit more, but I think it's very interesting how the media can suddenly start promoting a political party. And there is some evidence that there was some kind of switch a few years back when the media suddenly decided to promote UKIP almost in the. But I think there's two possible explanations for that. You could take the conspiracy explanation and say, well, you know, sinister forces are building up UKIP, I need to knock it down, or something like that. I think the other explanation is more innocent, and that is that the BBC and other media have been forced, if you like, by the obvious support for UKIP to recognise UKIP. In other words, it's a rather grudging admission that UKIP has got significant support, and so they've had to promote it. And of course the BBC has been rightly criticised for promoting the case for greater European Union integration for many years.
Why a lot of people are not paying their TV license.
Yeah, indeed, and why I haven't, one of the reasons I haven't got a TV and haven't done for 12 years, because I don't really want to. There are two reasons for that, but I don't want to spend £150 a year promoting a propaganda machine, and which it is on many issues. You know.